What is up, YouTube? My wife just left me. Let's get 5,000 likes on this video or I will lose custody of my kid. So this is part 3 of the Pokemon abilities video. Check out part 1 and 2 to catch up. But by now you should know the drill, so let's go over some of the mistakes I made. In part 2 I said Toxic Chain poisons your opponent. It actually badly poisons them. And the difference is that poison will deal a set amount of damage at the end of every turn, and badly poison will deal a smaller amount of damage, but at the end of every turn it will increase. I said that Effect Spore has a 10% chance to either poison, paralyze, or put your opponent to sleep. In later gens it was actually buffed to 30%. And then it would have a 9% chance of poison, 10% chance of paralyze, and 11% chance to put your opponent to sleep. So the calculation I gave a little earlier of 84.8% chance of your opponent being affected by one of the contact abilities is actually boosted to 88.2%. I mentioned that Disguise will absorb 1 hit in exchange for 10% of your health. It's actually 1/8 of your health, or 12.5%. And some people mentioned that Disguise only works with Mimikyu, but we're only going off the description of the abilities. So if the ability doesn't specify a Pokemon has to have it, like Poison Puppeteer, then the ability will work on this Pokemon. I said that the abilities Guts, Marble Scale, and Quick Feet wouldn't activate because the ability Comatose puts you in a drowsing state and doesn't technically count you as asleep, and you don't technically have the sleep status. And one of the reasons I said that is because if a Pokemon has Comatose and uses the move Facade, Facade isn't boosted because the move Facade should be boosted whenever you have any status condition, or at least that's what I thought. Facade actually only checks if you're burned, poisoned, or paralyzed, and not when you're asleep. So actually, I think these 3 abilities will activate. Guts will give you a 50% boost to your attack, Marble Scale will give you a 50% boost to your defense, and Quick Feet will give you a 50% boost to your speed. So they're not doubled or reversed by Contrary and Simple. And then for some quick clarifications, one thing I should have pointed out is that all Dark Pokemon are immune to moves that are boosted because of the ability Prankster. One other thing to quickly clarify, I kind of mixed up my words when I was talking about Terra Shell, so I made it sound like Terra Shell just halves the damage from any incoming attacks. What actually happens is that it makes it not very effective. So for example, if a move was going to do 100 damage and it was super effective, it would be boosted to 200 damage, and the ability Shadow Shield and Multiscale will then take that 200 damage and cut it in half to 100. But Terra Shell will take that 200 damage and actually move it down to 50, because it goes from super effective to not very effective. And in the last video, I mentioned that some commenters mentioned that this ability that encompasses all the other abilities should be called All for One or One for All. And the commenters have spoken and they've chosen All for One, which apparently is a My Hero Academia reference, which I've never actually seen. So you guys kind of tricked me into making a My Hero Academia reference. I'm not really sure how to feel about that, but it is what it is. And again, thank you to everyone who supported the channel this far. It means so much to me. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help this channel keep going. And now for the move abilities. And these abilities give your moves some extra property or boost them in some way. Stench adds a 10% chance to make your opponent flinch, and this 10% flinch chance is added to every single move. So now every single move that already even has a secondary effect also has a 10% chance to flinch your opponent. The ability Syringace doubles the chance of secondary effects activating, so on top of any secondary effects a move might have, it also has a 20% chance to flinch. But the next ability, Sheer Force, removes any secondary effects that moves might have, and then boosts their power by 30%. And since the ability Stench gives all your attacking moves a 10% chance to make your opponent flinch, so that means every single move will lose its secondary effect, but then be boosted by 30%. And the 4 pinch abilities, Overgrow, Blaze, Torrent, and Swarm, will power up your Grass, Fire, Water, and Bug moves by 50% whenever you're at 33% or lower health. The ability Tinted Lens will double the power of not very effective moves, and the ability Neuroforce will boost the power of super effective moves by 25%. The ability Super Luck boosts the chance of critical hits from 1 in 24 to 1 in 8, and the ability Sniper boosts the power of critical hits by 50%. Critical hits will do 225% damage instead of the regular 150% damage. Rockhead protects you against any recoil damage, except for one move, which is Struggle. And then the ability Reckless will boost the power of moves that would have recoil damage by 20%. Then the ability Adaptability boosts stab damage from 1.5 to 2 times. The ability Technician boosts moves that are 60 base power or less by 1.5 times. The ability No Guard skips accuracy checks for all Pokemon on the field, so every move from any Pokemon on the field is landing, as long as the other Pokemon isn't immune to that attack. The ability Skill Link allows for multi-hit moves to always hit the max number of times, so if it can hit 2 to 3 times, it'll always hit 3 times, and if it can hit anywhere from 2 to 5 times, it'll always hit 5 times. The ability Analytic boosts the power of your moves by 30% if you're the last to move that turn. The abilities Mold Breaker, Turbo Blaze, and Terrible allow you to ignore certain abilities that your opponent might have. There are a few abilities that can't be ignored by these abilities though. For example, if you use a fire type attack against a Pokemon that has Flash Fire, it will actually hit and Flash Fire won't trigger and the Pokemon won't be immune to fire type damage. But if you use a fire type attack against a Pokemon that has the ability Fluffy, the fire type attack would do regular damage because you're ignoring the double damage part of Fluffy. This also allows you to one-hit KO Pokemon that have the ability Sturdy. Scrappy allows you to hit ghost types with normal or fighting type moves, and the ability Mind's Eye does the same but also ignores your opponent's accuracy or evasion changes, but that's also covered by No Guard. Infiltrator will allow you to hit through screens, substitutes, or safeguard. The ability Parental Bond will allow you to use your move one more time after it lands, but the second attack does 25% of the original damage, but this doesn't activate for multi-strike moves. If your opponent is poisoned, the ability Merciless will make every single move you land a critical hit. The ability Corrosion allows you to poison Steel-type Pokemon, but not damage them with Poison-type attacks, so you can use things like Poison Gas and Toxic on them, but you can't use things like Sludge Bomb. The ability Unseen First will allow your moves to hit through protecting moves like Protect, Spiky Shield, and Baneful Bunker. Now, you might think the ability Long Reach prevents this, but Long Reach only protects you from contact effects of your opponent. You're still actually making contact with them though. So the ability Unseen First isn't negated. The ability Strong Jaw boosts biting moves by 50%, Mega Launcher boosts pulse moves by 50%, the ability Iron Fist boosts punching moves by 20%, Tough Claws boosts contact moves by 30%, and the ability Sharpness boosts slicing moves by 50%. The ability Punk Rock boosts sound moves by 30% and also halves damage from sound type attacks, but you're already immune to sound based attacks due to soundproof. The ability Stakeout does double damage to Pokemon that switched in that turn. The ability Dark Aura and Fairy Aura boost the damage of Dark and Fairy type moves by 33%, but the ability Aura Break reverses that, so Fairy and Dark type moves only do 75% damage instead of 133% damage. The ability Steelworker boosts Steel type moves by 50%, and then the ability Steely Spirit further boosts Steel type attacks by 50%, but it also boosts your partner's Steel type attacks by 50% as well. The ability Dragon's Maw and Rocky Payload boost Dragon and Rock type moves by 50%. The ability Transistor boosts Electric moves by 30%. The ability Electromorphous will put you in a charged state whenever you're hit, which doubles the power of your next Electric type attack, and the ability Wind Power will also put you in a charged state if Tailwind is set up on your field, or if you're hit with a Wind move, but the charged state doesn't stack. And now for the 8 in Eyes ability, which are Normalize, Aerolate, Refrigerate, Pixelate, and Galvanize. So Normalize turns all your moves into normal type moves, but the other 4 abilities will turn any normal moves into Flying, Ice, Fairy, or Electric moves, and then give them a 20% boost on top of that. So if we're going by the logic that all these abilities are active at the same time, this means Normalize will turn all your moves into normal moves, but then the next 4 abilities will add their type to normal moves. So you'll be dealing 5 different types of damage: Normal, Flying, Electric, Fairy, and Ice. Since Aerolate, Galvanize, Refrigerate, and Pixelate all boost your attacks by 20%, so that means all your moves are going to be dealing over 200% damage. And here's the type chart for this quintuple type move. Also, since Gale Wings is active at 100% health, and all your moves are going to have the Flying type added, that means whenever you're at 100% health, every single move is going to be at +1 priority. Also, since you have the ability Mold Breaker, your opponent isn't protected by things like Armor Tail and Dazzling. They are protected from higher priority moves due to Psychic Terrain though, because there's no ability, at least now, that ignores the effects of terrains. But since you're dealing Electric type damage, all Ground type Pokemon are going to be immune to your attacks, since there is an ability, at least for now, that allows Electric type moves to damage Ground type Pokemon. But Ghost type Pokemon aren't immune because of the normal damage, because you have Scrappy and Mind's Eye. And then the ability Liquid Voice changes any sound-based moves into water moves as well. So in addition to sound-based moves dealing normal, flying, ice, fairy, and electric type damage, sound-based moves will have the added water type. So you would then be dealing 6 different types of damage. And here's a type chart for the sextuple type move. And the ability Screen Cleaner will remove any screens on both sides of the field whenever this Pokemon is switched in. The ability Wonder Skin makes your opponent's status moves more likely to miss, a 50% accuracy drop, but since no guard is active, all moves skip accuracy checks anyway. And for an ability you've probably all been waiting for, it's Truant. So Truant makes you loft around on the next turn after you use an attack. And then one important thing to note about Truant is that if you're on a Truant turn, you can't actually switch out. So if you use an attack, you'll use the attack that turn, but then can't switch out until the end of the next turn. So here's a summary of all the boosts to your moves. Alright, and now for the terrain abilities. So the terrain abilities either set up terrain or depend on terrain being up. So if having hundreds of abilities at once, or having moves that deal 5 or 6 different types of damage isn't broken enough, this section might push it over the edge. So if we're going by the logic that all these abilities can activate at the same time, that means the 4, well technically 5 terrain abilities are going to set terrains all at once. Grassy Terrain will be active, healing 1/8 HP of all grounded Pokemon. Electric Terrain will also be active, preventing any grounded Pokemon from going to sleep, and then Psychic Terrain will be active, protecting all grounded Pokemon from higher priority attacks. And then Misty Terrain will also be active, protecting all grounded Pokemon from non-volatile status conditions, and reducing the damage from Dragon-type moves by 50% for grounded Pokemon. But since this Pokemon is levitating, it doesn't actually gain any of the protections or effects provided by the terrains. So it'll be active for any other Pokemon on the field that's grounded. You do get a 33% special attack boost due to Hadron Engine. Also, Grass Pelt will boost your defense by 50% because Grassy Terrain is active, and then Surge Surf will double your speed since you're an electric terrain. And these are both invisible boosts. Okay, and now for the type abilities. So the type abilities change your type in some way. Multi-type and RKS system change your type based on the plate or memory disk you hold. But due to Klutz, you won't actually gain the 20% boost provided by the plates, but your initial type will match whatever plate or memory disk you're holding. I say initial type because once all terrains are active, Mimicry will change your type to match the terrain. But since all 4 terrains are active, that means your type will change to Grass, Fairy, Electric, and Psychic. But once you use your first move, Protean and Libero will activate, and since all your moves are dealing normal, flying, fairy, ice, and electric type damage, and maybe water type damage as well, your type will then change to either have those 5 or 6 types. And here's the defensive type chart if you change to those types. But if your opponent is able to damage you, Color Change will activate and change your type to whatever move they just hit you with. And now for the weather abilities. So the weather abilities either set the weather or depend on the weather being up. So similarly to the terrain abilities, all the weather setting abilities will activate at once, and then all the weathers will be active. But because of the abilities Cloud9 and Airlock, weather doesn't actually have effect while this Pokemon is on the field. So whenever this Pokemon is on the field, the sun will be up, it will be raining, there will be a snowstorm, and there will be a sandstorm. But there will also be extreme sunlight due to Desolate Land, and then heavy rain due to Primordial Sea, and then strong winds due to Delta Stream. But whenever this Pokemon switches out, sun, rain, hail, and sandstorm will stay active, but harsh sunlight, heavy rain, and strong winds all disappear when this Pokemon leaves the field. And these next abilities can't activate because of Cloud9 or Airlock. The abilities Swift Swim, Chlorophyll, Sand Rush, and Slush Rush won't activate, so your speed won't be doubled by each of these abilities. The abilities Ice Body and Rain Dish won't heal your HP in rain or snow. The ability Dry Skin won't heal your HP in rain or lower your HP in sun. You still would be immune to water attacks, and you still would technically take double damage from fire type attacks, but you're already immune to fire type attacks anyway. The ability Solar Power won't lower your HP in the sun, but also won't give you a boost to your special attack. Hydration won't cure any status conditions you have in the rain. Leaf Guard won't prevent you from getting any status conditions in sunlight, but you're already immune to status conditions anyway. Sand Veil and Snow Cloak won't boost your evasiveness in sandstorm or snow. Flower Gift won't boost your attack or special defense of you or your partner in the sunlight. Sand Force won't boost the power of rock, steel, or ground type attacks in sandstorm. The ability Harvest will regrow your berry in harsh sunlight whenever you use it at the end of the turn. This does have a 50% chance to activate outside of sun, which I actually kind of forgot about, so this could have actually gone with the item abilities. But due to Klutz, it doesn't really matter anyway. And the last ability for the section is Terraform Zero. So like the Embody aspect abilities, this ability can only activate when you Terra. But more specifically, it can only activate when Terrapagos terastallizes, because this ability specifically mentions Terrapagos. So whenever Terrapagos terastallizes, it will actually remove all the weather and terrains from the field. But this only activates once you terastallize. So if this Pokemon switches out and then switches back in, it resets all the terrains and weather effects. And you might think the ability Sandspit will then override all the weather abilities to reset Sandstorm, but since Sandstorm is technically active, Sandspit won't activate until all the weathers are gone, or at least until Sandstorm is no longer active. And similarly to Sandspit, Seed Sower will only activate if Grassy Terrain is no longer active. And now for the form abilities. Now, this is technically the most contentious set of abilities to include in this video, mainly because form abilities are only really meant for the Pokemon that originally had them, but for the purposes of this video, we've only been going off the in-game description of abilities. So if an ability doesn't specifically mention a Pokemon has to have it, like Poison Puppeteer or Terraform Zero, it's free real estate here. The other issue is the form abilities, well, change your form. And so whenever you change the form, there has to be a new form to go into. So if say Wurmple had every single ability at once, well, you'd have the regular Wurmple form, but then you'd have to create a Hangry Wurmple form. Okay, not too bad, just put some angry eyes. but what about a Wurmple form for schooling? Okay, just put a bunch of Wurmples together. But what if Hangry and Schooling are both active at the same time? Okay, then you put a bunch together that are Angry. Okay, but what also about Disguise? And you can kind of see, once you start mixing all these abilities, not only do you have to have hundreds of different forms for one specific Pokemon, but then if you open this to every single Pokemon, in which there's over 1,000, you're getting close to millions of different forms to account for every combination. And I just don't have the artistic ability to do that. So we're just going to use our imagination. So once all the form abilities are active, I think it would look a little something like this. Ugh. So we answered the why as to why we're including these abilities, but now we have to answer the how. So aside from the aesthetic change of gaining a new form, I mainly care about the mechanical changes whenever a Pokemon changes form. So for most cases, it's either changes in stats or types. So that's what we're going to be applying to this Pokemon whenever these abilities activate. The ability Ice Face will absorb one physical attack and break after, kind of like Disguise, but it won't protect against any special moves. But once the Ice Face is broken, you'll go into your Noise form. You'll lose 40 base point stats in defense and special defense, and then gain 80 base points to your speed. The Ice Face will then return if snow or hail is on the field after the Ice Face is broken, but since the abilities Cloud9 and Airlock prevent the effects of snow or hail, you can't actually regain the Ice Face after it's broken. But since the abilities Ice Face and Disguise are both active at the same time, if you're hit with the physical move, Ice Face and the Disguise will break, but if you're hit with the special move, only the Disguise will break. So you still can actually take one physical move and not take any damage. Ability Stance Change puts you in your Shield form by default, and then whenever you attack, you go into your Blade form. And when you're in your Blade form, your defensive stats will drop by 90 points, but your attacking stats will raise by 90 points. You can go back into your Shield form, but it only activates if you use the move King Shield. And the only Pokemon that can learn that is Aegislash. So this ability can activate once with any other Pokemon, but it can never go back to Shield form unless it's Aegislash using King Shield. The ability Forecast will change your type to match the weather, Ice if it's snow or hail, Fire if it's sunny, and then Water if it's raining. But again, like Ice Face, since the effects of weather are cancelled out due to Cloud9 and Airlock, this ability can't activate. The ability Hunger Switch will change you from your full belly form into your hangry form. The only effect that this really changes is that if you use the move Aura Wheel, if you're in your full belly form, it'll be an electric type attack. But if you're in your hangry form, it'll be a dark type attack. But due to the previously mentioned 8 and Eyes abilities, all the move types are going to be changed anyway, so this one doesn't matter too much. And then depending on the generation, Battle Bond is either a really cool ability or a less cool ability. But since we're going by the Gen 9 effects and mechanics, Battle Bond will activate whenever you KO a Pokemon. You'll get a 1-stage boost to attack, special attack, and speed. Those will then both be doubled and reversed by Contrary and Simple. The ability Gulp Missile will activate whenever you use the move Surf or Dive, if you're able to learn that move. If you're above 50% health, you'll enter your Gulping form, which will then spit out an Arrokuda and deal 25% damage and lower your opponent's defense whenever you're hit after using Surf or Dive. And if you're below 50% health, you'll enter your Gorging form, which will spit out a Pikachu, which will then also deal 25% damage, but also paralyze your opponent. The ability Zen Mode can change either Galarian or normal Darmanitan into their Zen modes, so we'll take the stat changes and type changes from both. So whenever you're below 50% health, you'll gain the Psychic type and Fire type. You'll lose 110 points in attack, but also gain 20 back, gain 50 points to your defense and special defense, gain 110 points to your special attack, and then drop 40 points in speed and also gain 40 points back in speed. Whenever you drop below 50% HP, Shields Down will cause your defense and special defense to drop by 40 points, but your attack and special attack to raise by 40 base points, and your speed to also raise by 60 base points. Power Construct has different stat increases based on the form you're transforming from, but we'll just go from Zygarde's 50% form to its complete form. Whenever you're below 50% health, you'll gain 108 base points in HP, 10 in special attack, and then lose 10 in speed. The ability Schooling activates whenever you're above 25% HP, and then deactivates when you're below 25% HP. You also need to be at least level 20 for this ability to activate. But whenever it activates, you'll gain 120 points in attack, 110 points in defense, 115 points in special attack, 110 points in special defense, and lose 10 points in speed. The ability Zero to Hero will activate whenever you switch out. So once you switch this Pokemon out and switch it back in, you'll gain 90 points to your attack, 25 points to defense and special defense, and 53 points to special attack. So Terra Shift might seem like a useless ability, so Game Freak can make a cute little Pokemon to sell plushies with. And you're not wrong, but it does actually have an effect here. So whenever this Pokemon enters battle, you'll gain 5 base stat points to your HP, 30 to attack, 25 to defense, special defense, and speed, and then 40 to special attack. So if this Pokemon has attacked once, taken one special attack, switched out once, and is between 50 and 25% HP, you'll have 113 points added to your HP, 280 points to attack, 40 points to defense, 458 points to special attack, 40 points to special defense, and 145 to speed, for a total base stat increase of 1076. So even if the Pokemon with the lowest base stat total, Wishy-Washy, had all of these abilities and these conditions were met, it would have a higher base stat total than Eternamax Eternatus. But one big caveat of the form abilities is the ability Illusion. So Illusion is active as soon as you exit the Pokeball. All the other form abilities activate when you're on the field, so none of the form abilities can actually activate until after the illusion is broken. Okay, and now for the copy abilities. The ability Dancer will immediately copy any of the dancing moves your opponent uses or if your partner uses them, and you can still use any move that you selected that turn. And the next ability, Trace, will copy your opponent's ability, but only Trace will be overwritten. So just like with Wandering Spirit, only the ability Trace will be rewritten, if it's able to trace that ability. And the next two abilities, Power of Alchemy and Receiver, will copy your partner's ability whenever they faint. And so similarly to Trace, only these two abilities would be rewritten to copy whatever ability your partner had. Okay, and that's all of the abilities. Yep, all 310 of them, all 309 of them. Time to finally go out and touch some grass. All right. Oh man, what a beautiful day outside. What did I step on? Was that a Mew? Let me check my shoe. Oh shit, it's Ditto. So what does Ditto even do again? Oh, transforms into either Pokemon? Oh no. Oh. Okay, look. After some super legal testing, even a Pokemon with as1, if it transforms, basically everything about the Pokemon gets rewritten. And you can see here in the testing, if Calyrex uses Transform, which is super legal, trust me guys, my uncle is Nintendo, all the abilities get rewritten. So Calyrex here transforms into Torkoal. So now whenever Torkoal is sent out, Drought will activate. So even if Calyrex as a Torkoal gets a KO, Grimnate doesn't activate, and this Aggron here is able to eat its berry, since Unnerve is no longer active. So I guess everyone in the comments was probably right. This was a total waste of time. Wait, what's that? What is that? Wait, is that Terra Stellar? An illusion. Okay, guys, look, you see how much video is left. I wasn't gonna do all this if Imposter was gonna break everything. But to be fair, if this Pokemon is the only Pokemon in your party, or even if it's the last Pokemon in your party and it's sent out, Imposter will activate and it will overwrite everything about this Pokemon. Unless the opposing Pokemon is already transformed or behind an illusion itself. But that's a very rare scenario. So let's say this Pokemon isn't the last Pokemon in your party. That means illusion will be active and you will be disguised as the last Pokemon in your party. So like I mentioned with the forms abilities before, none of the other form abilities can activate until the illusion is broken. So even if you're playing on a generation before terrestrialization, you still do have this one thing going for you. But in Gen 9, since we now have terrestrialization, one interesting quirk about Terra Stellar is that whenever a Pokemon is terrestrialized into Terra Stellar, it can't transform. So here you can see Ditto was sent out and it transformed. But then I terrestrialized and swapped out into another Pokemon. And then when I swapped Ditto back in, Imposter couldn't activate because you're Terra Stellar. So all you gotta do to keep all these abilities is to have this Pokemon not be the last Pokemon in the party and then immediately terrestrialize. Okay, so that's actually all of the abilities. So the next question is, how would you actually beat this Pokemon with every single ability at once? So there are a couple ways that I've thought of to actually maybe beat this Pokemon. One, you can exploit Imposter and also prevent it from terrestrializing into Terra Stellar. So if a Pokemon is transformed into either Terapagos or Ogerpon, it can't then terrestrialize. Any other Pokemon, it can transform and then terrestrialize. So that's one way to prevent terrestrialization and also lock it into transform. But the illusion has to be broken now, otherwise Imposter won't activate. So it sounds simple enough breaking the illusion, but how are you going to do that? Well, there are actually a few ways to do that. One way would be to have a Pokemon with the Mold Breaker abilities and the Ability Shield. Technically, Mycelium might too, but that would only be for status moves, and this would allow you to ignore most of the abilities that provide immunity and actually start doing some damage. Or use one of the trio of light Pokemon's signature moves, so Moongeist Beam, Sunsteel Strike, and Photon Geyser, which also all ignore abilities that would provide immunity. But one other strategy that actually any Pokemon could pull off would be to use Struggle. Since Struggle deals typeless damage, it ignores things like Wonder Guard. But you're going to be doing a lot of damage to yourself, so it's not the most sustainable strategy. It'd only really be to get that first hit off. So if this Pokemon doesn't Terastallize and you're able to deal even 1 damage, the illusion will break and then Imposter can then activate. And then you're back to dealing with a regular Pokemon. So that's the only way to really do damage and start dealing with this Pokemon. But if this Pokemon is behind illusion and immediately Terastallizes, then it can never transform, and you have to deal with all these abilities. So the Mold Breaker abilities and Trio of Light attacks would still work, but once the illusion breaks and this Pokemon starts losing health, all the other form abilities are going to start to activate and this Pokemon's going to gain a ton of stats. And then you're starting to deal with a monster. And with things like Regenerator, allowing it to switch out and regain 33% of its health. But leave any strategies in the comments that you might think of, and I can address it in a bonus video. But say you had this Pokemon. What moves would you want to run on this Pokemon? So to deal with Pokemon with the Mold Breaker abilities and the Ability Shield, the move Knockoff would be a good move to have. But since Knockoff wouldn't be dealing Dark-type damage, it won't be super effective against a Trio of Light Pokemon. But since you're now dealing Electric-type damage on all your attacks, all Ground-type Pokemon will be immune to your attacks. So the next move you would want is Terra Blast. And since once you Terastallize into the Stellar type, Terra Blast will be dealing Stellar-type damage, which will then allow you to hit Ground-type Pokemon. And whenever you use Terra Blast as a Stellar-type Pokemon, the damage increases, but also it drops your attack and special attack by 1 stage. But since Simple and Contrary are both active, it actually becomes a +2 stat increase to your attack and special attack. But since you also have the ability Parental Bond, it will allow you to use Terra Stellar Terra Blast one more time, further boosting your attack stats, if you weren't able to knock out that Pokemon in the first attack. So the abilities Contrary and Simple actually kind of redeem themselves here. Another good move might be a pivoting move like U-Turn or Volt Switch, allowing you to switch out and regain HP with Regenerator, and also skip your Truant turns. And the last move may be Toxic, since it will make all your moves critical hits to Pokemon that are poisoned, which will be useful against all types of Pokemon except for Poison-type Pokemon. So what Pokemon can learn all 4 of these moves at once? Incineroar, Jump Scare! Okay, not really Incineroar. Incineroar is close, but it can only learn Toxic in Generation 7. After that, it can't learn Toxic. So what Pokemon can actually learn these moves? The 8 Pokemon that can learn these 4 moves are Mew, Gligar, Gliscor, Zoroark, Volibee, Mandibuzz, Shroodle, and Grafaiai. Technically Smeargle too, but he's broken enough already. And while Mew is a fitting Pokemon since it can already learn all types of attacks, it kind of makes sense it could learn all abilities, but dark Pokemon like Mandibuzz and Zoroark would be good since you'd be immune to Photon Geyser and resist Moongeist Beam and be neutral to Sunsteel Strike after you Terastallize, since you retain your original types after you Terastallize into Terra Stellar. But leave in the comments what move combination and Pokemon you think might be good to have all abilities at once. But the only condition is the Pokemon you choose has to be able to learn those 4 types of moves. Or we could just be boring and say Smeargle with all 4 Oko moves. So that's the end of this series for now. I do plan on updating it whenever Gen 10 comes out and adds new abilities, or if Legends EA adds a couple new abilities. Like I said before, I do plan on making a bonus video addressing any mistakes I made in this video and some of the strategies to beat this Pokemon, as well as the Pokemon and move combinations you choose to have all abilities at once. And once I have all the corrections, I do plan on putting everything back together and re-editing parts 1, 2, and 3 to have everything corrected and have one large video encompassing this entire question. And again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watched this far and has given all the support to make this video and continue supporting me making future videos. One video you guys have asked for is what if a Pokemon had every single held item at once. So I do plan on making that video. It might be the next video. There is another video I want to make about Gen 1 Mewtwo being broken in Gen 9. But leave in the comments if you'd want to see that video or a video about a Pokemon having every single item at once. Or just leave in the comments any other video suggestions that you guys want to see. So thank you guys so much for the support for the first 2 videos and any support for this video. I'll see you in the next one.